Very good afternoon, everyone. This is our second webinar in this litigation landscape series with VIL. And in our first webinar, which was held on January 22nd, we had undertaken some basic topics like taxability and valuation. Today, we'll be discussing input tax credit. So, as we all know that in the pre-GST regime, there were multiple levies, central excise, service tax, VAT, and at times there were multiple levies on the same supply, especially whenever there was a mixed supply issue or a supply of tangibles. Both VAT and service tax authorities used to tax those levies. Therefore, it was felt that probably GST would do away with such issues, and GST would bring in a seamless credit chain with making the life simple for the taxpayer. Having said that, since input tax credit is a backbone of GST, we'll see today how the tax flow is under GST, whether it is seamless, whether it is good and simple, or there are complications around it. So if we see Section 16 of the CGST Act, and there are perimeteria provisions under the state GST Acts, so we'll refer to the CGST law. Section 16 provides for availment of credit on inputs, input services, and capital goods, which are used or intended to be used in the course or furtherance of business. And therefore, all such credit should be available. Business is very widely defined under GST law, and it includes all activities, whether or not they are for pecuniary benefit, whether they are in connection with incidental or ancillary to business, or irrespective of the volume, frequency, and regularity, etc. Also, supplies which are acquisition of goods or services which are in connection with the commencement or closure of business are also part and parcel of business, and therefore ITC in relation to such supplies is also available. Now, when we see whether it is seamless or are this availment of ITC conditional, so Section 16 provides for the conditions for availment of ITC. In addition to that, Section 17 provides for certain restrictions. These restrictions are related to for business, or whether they are for the purpose of business or not. Secondly, whether these are for taxable supplies or for exempt supplies. And therefore, also there are several restrictions prescribed under Section 17 where the credit is especially blocked or barred, and therefore one needs to take note of these and make reversals accordingly. So now we'll deal with the eligibility restrictions, etc., relating to ITC.
So in this regard, the first and foremost thing which we have to see under GST is the eligibility conditions. Suppose you have a tax invoice. Now you need to understand that what are the conditions which has been prescribed under Section 16 to ensure whether to also ensure that whatever credit which you are availing is you are eligible or not. So Section 16 provides for various conditions. The first and the foremost condition is receipt of goods and services. So if you have a tax invoice and you have not received the goods, then you won't be allowed to take the input tax credit. But if you have received the goods or the services on that tax invoice, then you are allowed to avail the credit. Then the tax invoice which you have needs to have certain particulars which are prescribed under the GST Act to ensure that you can avail the credit. So the condition, second condition is of possession of a valid document. Apart from a tax invoice, there are other documents which are prescribed against which the ITC can be availed, such as debit note, credit note, the bill of entry, and other invoices as well. This is there under the GST Act. On the basis of those documents, the ITC can be availed. So what are the mandatory particulars that are to be there in the invoice which you have? First of all, the GSTN of both yours, buyers, and the sellers. Then the description of the invoice should be proper in respect of the goods and services which you are availing. Then the total value of the goods and services is required to be mentioned on the that invoice. Then the tax amount which is being charged is required to be mentioned, and it's also required to mention the place of supply, whether it is interstate or intrastate. Now, might be a situation where the tax invoice which you have might not contain one or more particulars which are the mandatory particulars prescribed under section 16. Then what is the what is the way out of that? In those cases, the courts under the earlier regime have allowed credit basis that the tax has been paid by the supplier. The court has held that not containing one of the particulars is merely a procedure irregularity, and basis that the credit cannot be denied unless the payment of tax itself has been disputed by the department. So if you have an invoice in which the particulars are there to identify the recipient and supplier of services, then ITC can be availed. If the ITC is denied, it can surely be litigated before the courts. Then even if you have an invoice, then there's a condition that the returns are required to be furnished. So there then we'll discuss that in this regard there is rule 36.4 which provides certain other restriction in addition to section 16, is that the supplier is required to upload the documents is GSTR1. What if the what if the invoices has not been uploaded? If the condition is not satisfied by not uploading the documents, then what will happen? In those cases, the government introduced section 36.4 providing that only up to the 20% of the amount of invoices which has not been uploaded, only for that amount the ITC can be availed. Subsequent to that, this condition was reduced to 10% and later 5%. It is important to note that this condition was introduced in 2019. So if any credit is availed before 2019, this condition will not be applicable. You do not ensure that you're availing 20, 10 or 5% of the credit. So there have been instances in the recent past where the SSCs have been receiving some auto-generated mail saying that you have availed 105 in excess of 105 or 110 or 120% of the credit, and you are advised to reverse that. In our view, this is invalid. There are multiple reasons behind that. First of all, these emails are not a show cause notice. If it is not a show cause notice, then not demanding any tax from you, then this will have no value and you need not entertain these mails. Also, the last year, the government introduced the concept of document identification number, that is the DIN. These auto-generated email does not contain a DIN number, and the government has introduced provided a specific circular which says that if a document does not contain a DIN number, it will be considered as to never have been issued. So these emails can be ignored by the taxpayer.
So we'll discuss, as Ayush mentioned, that Rule 36.4 prescribes a condition, and uploading of document by the supplier is a mandatory condition. So this rule has been challenged before various high courts. High Court of Delhi, Gujarat and Rajasthan are dealing with these situations, and these cases notices have been issued. Now, what has been done in these cases is taxpayer has said that linking the eligibility of ITC in the hands of recipient basis the uploading of documents by the supplier. Number one, that is beyond the control of taxpayer recipient. Secondly, they have also challenged that this 20%, 10%, 5% criteria, making it whatever invoices have been uploaded and beyond that, whatever 5%, 10% is without any basis. This is very arbitrary and there's no rationale behind it. And therefore, they have challenged the provisions under Rule 36.4 itself. Now, this 36.4 is a short-lived provision now in view of what Ayush will just discuss. So we'll see why it is short-lived.
Now, after satisfying these three conditions, the next condition is that the payment of tax should have been paid to the government. Now, with regard to the payment of tax, in our view, this condition is not substantial, is invalid. Reason being, first of all, it treats the guilty and the bona fide defaulting recipients at par. Hence, it is violative of Article 14. there have been multiple avenues which has been provided under the GST Act, like Section 73, 74, and other such provisions where it says that if the payment of tax has not been paid to the government, then a notice can be issued, order can be issued for recovery of that tax amount. Recovering the same amount from the SEC who has availed a valid credit of that amount is incorrect, because there is no such provision which through which the SEC, which the recipient who is taking the input tax credit can recover the same from the supplier. There is a matching concept which was introduced under the GST, but the same has not been made effective till date. Hence, there is no provision which is provided for the recipient to recover the same from the supplier, but the government had such provisions. Hence, when the government has such provisions, putting a burden on the recipient is incorrect. Also, in view of the same, the law cannot compel the person to do something which is impossible in itself.
So as Ayush discussed that there are these conditions are not valid. So these this particular condition under 16(2)(c) of the GST law has also been challenged before various high courts through writ petitions, and notices have been issued. No finality has been attained as yet. The primary contention of notices in these cases has been that one, the recipient has been put under an impossible obligation. How can a recipient ensure payment of tax by the supplier? And why should a bona fide recipient of supply goods or services suffer non-availment of ITC because of the default committed by a supplier? So they've also alleged discrimination, that the law does not discriminate, does not create any intelligent differentia between a guilty defaulter versus a bona fide person. So a person who is bona fidely availing all these benefits, ITC, and who has paid for the services, who has met all other conditions, should not be held liable, should not be denied credit of the supplies that it has procured. So these are the basic grounds. In Bharti Telemedia, some more provisions have been challenged. We will discuss those in the coming slides. Uh, so on this basis, the challenge has been there. We'll also discuss some other rulings in the pre-GST regime. So while service tax and uh, excise did not have a provision similar to the provision under section 16(2)(c) with regard to payment of tax by the supplier. However, several VAT laws had this provision, and there has been several challenge. These provisions were under challenge, and courts have given final rulings in these cases. So in for Delhi VAT, UP VAT, and Tamil Nadu VAT, there are first three cases: Arise, Sethi Flower, and Lawrence Livingstone, where courts held that this condition is not maintainable. This is not a tenable condition, because a recipient does not have a control, and therefore they read down this condition to mean that for bona fide purchasers this condition will not apply. However, in the case of Mahalakshmi Cotton for Maharashtra VAT, Bombay High Court held that this is ITC is a concession and the government can put restrictions, and this is a condition because the language used there was tax actually paid to government, and they read it that this condition is applicable, and therefore taxpayer the recipient needs to follow to comply with this condition as well. Now, from the overall perspective, we feel that for GST law also the principle is same, and therefore the recipient of supply cannot be expected to prove the impossible or do the impossible. Secondly, the arbitrariness insofar as the law fails to distinguish between a bona fide recipient versus a guilty recipient also goes to the root of the this condition, And we are hopeful that this condition will be read down or struck down by the courts in the rulings that we just discussed, the cases that are pending before various high courts.
After satisfying these four conditions which are provided under section 16, there's another condition which has been provided, that is that the payment by the recipient should be made within 180 days. Discussing these conditions, there are certain points which needs to basis which this provision is ineffective. First of all, what constitutes a failure to make payment as per the failure to make payment? So suppose if you have a situation where you have a contract with your supplier where the payment is to be made after a period of suppose 7 months, 8 months, can we say that the condition has been violated? The answer will be no, because there is no failure to make payment within 180 days. The failure should be in deliberate act where the payment has not been done by the recipient. If the failure is not a deliberate, it is because of some certain other circumstances, then that won't be considered as a failure. Second, ITC cannot be denied also since the tax has been paid to the government. And also, it is important to note that there's Rule 37 which has been framed in this regard. Rule 37 provides that if the payment is not made within 180 days, the amount is required to be added to the output tax liability. First of all, GSTR 2, which is the form prescribed under Rule 37 in this regard, has not been made effective. Hence, this rule will have no standing. Also, Section 73, which provides for recovery of the disputed tax amount in ITC, does not mention the word amount. Hence, there's no recovery provision under the GST laws to recover ITC where the payment has been made beyond 180 days.
So this very provision, as we discussed Bharti Telemedia ruling earlier, in that case, this provision has also been challenged. This is the second proviso to section 16 2C. This has also been made subject matter of challenge in Bharti Telemedia. Notices have been issued and matter is pending before the Honorable Delhi High Court.
Now, in the cases of post-purchase discount, suppose you have an agreement with the manufacturer where after a certain period of time, they provide you an additional discount on the amount which is paid to the manufacturer. Suppose 100 rupees was required to be paid and you finally pay off rupees 90. There are situations there where departments say that the final amount which has been settled is 90 rupees and you're required to reverse the ITC. However, are you required to reverse ITC in those cases? The answer will be no. Since the tax amount has already been paid on the full amount on which the invoice was issued, then the no ITC is required to be reversed in those cases.
So in this regard, there are a couple of advanced rulings and they are both in favor. As per the scheme announced, if there is a discount which is on the face of the invoice, then obviously whatever the remaining value is on that, the tax is to be paid. But question is that once the sale has effected complete and after purchasing goods, if there is a further discount, which could be on account of volume turnover basis, which could be on account of early payment or cash payment within stipulated time, or for whatever other commercial reasons, as per the scheme, if a discount is offered via commercial credit note, then courts have held, like in case of MRF and Santosh Distributor, that this is advanced ruling authority have held that there is no requirement of reversal of credit because the discount has been given by way of commercial credit note. Had it been a GST credit note, definitely there should have been proportionate reversal. But if it is through commercial credit note, no reversals are required.
As you all know, the recent finance bill was passed. In this finance bill, a new provision has been inserted under section 16. That is, it has said that the invoices and debit notes are to be required to be furnished by the supplier, and the same should have been communicated to the recipient. So the anomaly which we pointed out under Rule 36 subclause 4, which had no backing of the substantive law under the CGST Act, that has been resolved through this finance bill. However, it is important to note, first of all, this finance bill has not been passed till date, so this provision has not become a law. And second, this provision has been introduced as a prospective provision and not a retrospective provision. Hence, for the past period, this condition will still remain invalid, and all those challenges which have been made to Rule 36 subclause 4 prescribing the conditions of payment of tax to the government will still be held to be invalid. Satisfying all those conditions, there's an additional, what has to be kept in mind is the time limit of availing this credit. The time limit which has been prescribed for availing this credit is earlier of the following. That is the due date of filing GSTR 3B for the month of September following the end of financial year, which in the present scenario we can consider like for 2021 it will be September 21, or the due date of furnishing of the annual return. So whichever date will fall earlier will be the date for furnishing of uh, for availment of ITC.
So this time limit has been prescribed under section 16(4). Now this has also been challenged in the case of Bharti Telemedia as well as in Surat Mercantile Association before the courts. Notices have been issued, the matters are pending. And the main crux of challenge is that there are times when, because of the delay in filing of returns, the ITC cannot be availed, and therefore at times, because returns need to be filed only after payment of tax, and if tax has not been paid by the then returns are get delayed, and therefore the ITC gets barred. So there is a vicious cycle to it which has been challenged, and the courts will give their finding on these issues, these challenges.
Now, if you even have a tax invoice and fulfill all the conditions which have been provided under Section 16, the 5, 6 conditions which we just mentioned, still there are certain restrictions which have been provided under Section 17, and the SSC has to take note of all those conditions while availing the ITC on those invoices. These restrictions are majorly like motor vehicles having capacity of less than 13%, food and beverages, outdoor catering and beauty treatment, life insurance, life and health insurance services, membership of a club, health and fitness center, freebies like gifts, sample goods which are lost, stolen, destroyed, and written off. Uh, One is goods and services for construction of immovable property. These services which have been used for the personal consumption, and the tax paid on account of fraud, suppression, etc. So we'll be discussing the each conditions one by one. Coming on to the first condition of motor vehicle and other conveyances, suppose there's an employer who, there's a person who is providing the passenger transport services and takes in certain motor vehicles. Can a person avail ITC on those motor vehicles? The answer will lie in the provision itself, which says that for motor vehicle, ITC will be allowed only when the vehicle is of capacity of more carrying more than 13%. So if the vehicle has a capacity of less than 13%, then the ITC will not be available. Then services of general insurance services, repair and maintenance, which are availed in relation to these motor vehicles, will not be allowed. The above restrictions will not be applicable if it is the motor vehicle will not be applicable if the motor vehicle which is purchased are for further supply of motor vehicles. It is for the transportation of passengers, for imparting training.
So we'll discuss some advanced rulings on this aspect, where the courts have held that So for instance, in YKK, after 30th August 2018, when this condition came for more than 13 persons, after this date, the court allowed, the Advanced Ruling Authority allowed credit, ITC, to YKK. But prior to this period, they disallowed. Secondly, they also disallow. So what the courts uh, in these cases examined is whether the services, underlying services, are transportation of passengers, or whether it is a renting or hiring of cabs or vehicles. So in case it is renting of cab or hiring of cab, then the credit is not available. But if it is transport of passengers, like the employer providing transport facility to employees for picking them from their residence, dropping them at office or factory, and again return journey, then such services, the courts construed them to be transport of passenger, and credit was allowed. Uh, Same thing for in case of NIFA, the ambulance was purchased in November 2018, whereas the law made a stipulation effective 1st February 2019 that if a particular service is mandated by law, then credit on the same will be allowed. So ambulance became mandatory from 1st February 19, and thereafter, if NIFA would have purchased, they would have got the credit. But because they purchased the ambulance earlier, they did not get. In Mohana Ghosh, it was a case of renting of cabs. So the credit was denied.
So there are certain services which the employer is obligated under various laws to provide to their employees. One of such services is canteen services. The other services are of life insurance and health services, which they have to take for their employees. There have been instances in the past where the credit on these services has been disallowed. So it is relevant to examine that what is the restriction which is provided under Section 17 in this regard. So Section 17 provides that the ITC will be barred on food and beverages and outdoor catering services, health services, insurance services, leasing and renting of motor vehicle, except when they are made for the outward supply of the same category. And ITC will also be barred where it is services are for the membership of health club and fitness center, and it is extended to employees on vacation. However, there's a proviso which was inserted, which says that ITC will be available if it is obligatory under any law.
So we'll again see some advanced ruling on this. So in the case of Musashi, which was engaged in manufacture of auto components, they were availing services of an outdoor caterer to provide catering canteen services to their employees. Now this was mandated under the Factories Act. The advanced ruling authority, however, said that catering services have no nexus to their output service, which is manufacture of auto components. And even if it is mandated under the law, the credit of the same will not be available. In our view, this is a completely erroneous ruling, because the law itself prescribes that if a particular activity is mandated under the law, then the credit would be available. But the authority wrongly declined this credit.
Coming on to another classic case of where the employer are providing certain services to their are making certain services available for their employees. Suppose it's a case of health services. So they have maintained an infirmary in their premises, where that if there any employee who catches cold or in some other situation, the health services can be provided to their employees. Or consider the situation of rental free accommodation which has been provided, or the situation where some benefits have been extended to the managing director or the similar person of high authority as a rental as free service as services to them. Whether credit will be available on those services or not, that is the question. So section 17 bars services used for personal consumption.
So we'll discuss some advanced rulings in this regard. In National Aluminium, they were located in a remote area where the nearest city was almost 350 kilometers away. And for this purpose, they had mining and their factory where they constructed a residential colony for workmen. And they were maintaining that residential colony because otherwise it was not feasible for the workmen to come to the place of work. Now, for this maintenance service, the authority of advanced ruling said this is for personal consumption and they declined the ITC. In our view, this is not correct position because this is a business expense. This is not a personal residence of any employee where the service maintenance has been provided, but it is a business expense. Otherwise, the workmen cannot work in that area. Likewise, in POSCO, rent-free accommodation was provided to higher management. And there also it has to be seen whether it is a business expense or it is for the meant for enjoyment of these persons. Obviously, if it is a business expense, the credit ought to be allowed. In Chennai Port Trust, the law mandated, the Port Trust law mandated that the taxpayer provides in-house medical hospital and free medicines to its employees, their families, pensioners, etc. Despite this, the authority for advanced ruling declined credit, denied credit, and in our view, this is not correct position of law. This is clearly there stipulated in the law, and yet the rulings are incorrect.
Hence, if there is any credit which has been denied in this respect, the same can be challenged before the authorities. And these rulings in this regard are very much incorrect. Now, one of the most litigated provision under the Section 17 related to ITCs for the goods and services and the works contract service which are used for immobile property. So suppose you are putting up a plant and machinery which has to be fixed by foundation to the earth. Now there have been instances where the credit has been denied on those, reason being saying that the same forms an immobile property and the same cannot be removed without a wear and tear. In this regard, it is relevant to examine that what Section 17.5 allows and disallows. So Section 17.5 disallows works credit on works contract service, goods and services which are used for construction of immobile property. There are certain exceptions attached to it. First, if the uh, goods and services are for plant and machinery and used for further supply of works contract service. Now, the plant and machinery has been defined. It means apparatus, equipment, machinery, which is fixed to earth by foundation or structural support. It is relevant to note that if the structure has been made for the plant and machinery, the credit of the same will also be allowed in this situation. There are certain exclusions which have been provided: telecommunication tower, land, building, or a civil structure, and pipeline which is placed outside the factory. It is relevant to understand what is the meaning of the term immobile property. So immobile property per se has not been defined under the GST Act, but the same has been defined under the General Clauses Act and Transfer of Property Act. It says that anything which is immobile property means land, benefit arising out of land, and things which are attached to earth or permanently fastened to anything attached to earth. Hence, there are two conditions which are required to be met. First, degree of attachment, and second is the object and intent of attachment. If the degree of attachment is such that it has, like, the machinery has been placed in on some civil structures and attached with nut and bolts, it does not become an immobile property. It has been attached with nut and bolts to only ensure the wobble free operation, that the machinery, when it is working, it does not shivers or move from here and there. Hence, the degree of the attachment is required to be seen in each and every situation to identify whether it's a immobile property or not. The second condition is the object and the intent of the attachment. So suppose if you have an AC which is attached to a wall, it will be a part of immobile property, but that if the AC becomes an immobile property, the answer will be no, because the AC has been attached to the wall only for the purpose to enjoy the benefits of the AC and not the land per se. Hence, the object and the intent of the attachment is required to be seen in each and every situation. Therefore, whenever it is to determine whether it is a plant and machinery or not, and whether forms a part of immovable property or not, these tests are required to be seen for each and every situation.
So we'll take up some case laws on this subject. And these provisions 17.5C and 17.5D, where the restriction has been provided under the law for works contract services which are supplied for construction of immovable property, or supply of goods or services for construction of immovable property. These have been subject matter of challenge. So in the case of Safari Retreat, Orissa High Court gave a favorable ruling wherein they held that whatever goods services are required for construction of mall which was meant for renting out, would ITC on the same would be available. Now, Union of India has challenged this Orissa High Court ruling before Supreme Court. Supreme Court has issued notices, and the matter is pending before Supreme Court. In Delhi International Airport, the matter is pending before Delhi High Court. Again, the challenge is to 17.5C and 17.5D. In Bharti Airtel, they have not only challenged 17.5D, which is the construction goods and services for construction, they have also challenged the explanation to section 17, which excludes telecom towers from the scope of plant and machinery. Because Bharti Airtel is involved in telecom towers, it is in their interest to get ITC on telecom towers. So they have challenged this particular explanation also along with the provisions. And they have also challenged that the foundation that is used for plant and machinery should also get full credit. While the law itself allows it, they've also agitated that aspect. Then there are a lot of advanced rulings, and most of which are in the negative. All these advanced rulings, the issues were whether chiller plants, lift, escalator, travelator, water treatment plant, various sewerage treatment plant, etc., all which were considered as plant and machinery in erstwhile regime, because plant and machinery is defined under 17.5 in the explanation to include all apparatus, equipment, machinery fixed to earth by foundation or structural support, and that are used for making outward supply of goods, services, or both. So the definition is very wide, and there is a lot of jurisprudence around it as to what constitutes plant and machinery, or what constitutes an apparatus, equipment, and machinery. Having said that, the authority of advanced ruling, they tried to distinguish Safari Retreat case, saying that that is pending before Supreme Court, and only on the basis that all these things are attached to the immovable property, the building, and they become themselves part of the building, and they are immovable property, and therefore do not qualify as plant and machinery. Accordingly, they have denied ITC. That is the case in all these cases. That is the situation. Only for furniture and fixture, if there is anything which is loose, the authorities have allowed credit. Otherwise, they have denied. But in the case of WeWorks, the appellate authority allowed credit for detachable slidings and stacking glass partition, which can be taken out by unscrewing the bolt and nuts, and without destroying these slidings and glass partition, and therefore authority allowed credit. In case of Nipro, they were into manufacture of medicine. They were expanding their plant, and they wanted for that expansion there will be civil work, there will be a lot of plant and machinery, installing all sorts of air conditioning, sewerage treatment, firefighting, electrical equipment, plumbing. So all sorts of equipment were required to be, plant and machinery were required to be installed. Authority allowed credit in most of the cases, but still in this ruling also they erred on 2 points. One, for every plant and machinery, they tried to bring nexus to the uh, output supply of Nipro. So while the law does not require an access to be established, if it is an expense for business and were used for furtherance of business, that ought to have been allowed. But one is they introduced the concept of nexus. Second, they even declined the credit on foundation civil structure for foundation purpose. So that also they should have allowed. In other cases, Bal paper, it was office furniture, fixture, and air conditioning. In Satyesh Braincam, they were manufacturing salt and bromine chemicals by constructing bunds. And for those bunds, the credit was allowed. So these are some favorable rulings. We also discussed the issue of pre-operating lease premium, which is paid. So number of times what is seen is that the taxpayer takes some land on lease, and then on that land it constructs a building which is then used for its business purpose, for output supplies, whatever. Now the question is that this land, it is paying lease premium, etc., and whether the ITC of this lease premium that is paid on land would be available or not. In these two advanced rulings, the authorities declined, saying that land without land, the construction could not have taken place. So land is used for construction, and therefore, since construction itself is barred, any input goods or services for construction is debarred, and therefore the credit of lease premium is not available. In our view, this is a very incorrect position, for the very simple reason is that land is never used for construction. Land remains land. Land does not get destroyed or consumed, even whether building is there or building is not there. Even if the building is demolished, the land will remain, but without land, building cannot be constructed. So this land, at the time when the taxpayer has taken the land on lease, this land is taken on lease for with an intent to do business. So for furtherance of business, land has been taken on lease, and therefore the ITC on the lease premium should be available.
Now there may be situations where, as a part and parcel of the business, there are certain gifts or free samples which are distributed in the market or provided, like the standees which are provided, like in the case of medicines, some free medicines are provided for just for the testing purpose, and sometimes with the logo of the brand, with the image of the brand, some diaries, some pens are provided in the market. Now we can see that whether such ITC will be available in such cases or not. In this regard, Section 17 restricts credit on goods which are lost, stolen, destroyed, written off, disposed of by way of gift or free samples. Hence, Section 17 clearly restricts credit on these free supplies.
So we'll again check the rulings. So advanced ruling, as we have seen, as usual, very narrow approach has been adopted. They have only gone by the whether any consideration is charged or not. If no consideration has been charged while distributing these items, they have considered them to be free gifts and denied ITC in all these cases. Whereas what is to be seen is whether there is a commercial consideration behind distributing these goods. Are these goods distributed in general, open to anyone, everyone, or is there a scheme which requires the taxpayer to distribute these? For instance, turnover based, as we saw in the case of when we were discussing post sale discount, where through commercial credit note the discount was passed, and we held that, and even the advanced ruling authority held that ITC is not required to be reversed. Whereas in these cases, instead of commercial credit note, now the benefit is being passed for achieving certain criteria in terms of gold coins, where farmers were taking, for in biostat, farmers were taking buying fertilizer. if they buy a particular quantity or they make a payment of the fertilizer at an early date, they got these gold coins. So now ITC should not have been denied. It is like advertising, marketing, and promotion expense for these companies, which is a business cost, and therefore ITC should have been available. Same is the situation with Page Industry and BMW. Likewise, CSR expenses also. Polycab was incurring, for Kerala hit, flood hit people, they were distributing electrical goods, which was CSR, and CSR activity is prescribed, mandated under the company's law. And therefore, not only the ITC should be available, but it is an activity which ought to be promoted, and yet the ITC has been denied. In case of Golden Tobacco, however, where they were supplying cigarettes, and the scheme was that if somebody were to buy 100 cigarettes, they would get 10 cigarettes free. So essentially, the authority considered this to be two taxable supplies for single price. So instead of 110 cigarettes were being supplied for the price of 100. And there the authority held that ITC is available. Now, likewise, they could have done this whether it is the same product or some different product, because the value of the free supplies is actually built in the original taxable supply, and therefore it is a commercially designed activity, but the credit could not have been denied. So in most of these cases, the denial of credit is incorrect. Authorities have given incorrect rulings. In pre-GST, if we see on the aspect of CSR, the courts have examined, tribunal time and again examined this aspect, and they said that CSR is mandated under Companies Act, and therefore credit in relation to whatever input supplies are there, credit would be available. SANVAT credit would be available for the same.
Now, there are certain goods, it might happen that there might be a fire at the workplace, and there may be the goods which have been produced might get destroyed. Then, in those cases, there will be an implication on the ITC part. There's a section 17 which also restrict ITC on goods which have been lost, which have been destroyed. Hence, the ITC will be restricted on these goods as well.
So if we see rulings in this regard, in the case of JAG Chemicals, Gujarat authority said that the inputs which were used to manufacture intermediary goods as well as finished goods, and both intermediary goods were also sold in open market. So in this regard, when because of fire the intermediary and finished goods got destroyed, authority declined. They held that ITC is not available on inputs, because those very inputs were used to manufacture the intermediary goods as well as finished goods. In our view, this is a absolutely incorrect ruling, and the correct view was taken by Maharashtra AR in the case of Ordnance Factory, where Ordnance Factory was manufacturing weapons for Indian Army, armed forces, and whatever inputs were used, they were using, those were consumed for finished goods, and finished goods were destroyed during testing. So what the authority, Maharashtra authority, held is that the restriction under 17(5)(h) is on the goods lost or destroyed during testing, etc. Whereas in this case, the inputs were not destroyed as such. Inputs got consumed in the finished goods, and it is the finished goods which were destroyed during testing, and therefore ITC on inputs cannot be denied. So Maharashtra AR correctly interpreted the law, whereas Gujarat AR has erred in this case.
Basis what we have discussed in the back, we can say easily say that the GST is no longer a simple tax. You have to take into consideration the various conditions which have been provided under Section 16, various restrictions which have been provided under 17, and also take into consideration whether those restrictions are applicable in your case or not. The jurisprudence in the past is multiple on these points. So all jurisprudence should be considered while taking a position whether ITC is being taken on those tax invoices or not. Now, a recurrent provision was also introduced in the GST rules, that is Rule 86A. This rule talks about blocking of electronic credit ledger. So the commissioner or the authorized officer having reason to believe can block the ITC if the ITC has been fraudulently availed or it is ineligible due to following reasons. First, the supplier is not existence, non-receipt of goods and services, tax has not been paid by the supplier, if the recipient is non-existing, or the taxpayer or the person who is availing the ITC is not in possession of invoice or a debit note.
So there are two cases on this subject wherein the order of attachment or blocking of credit utilization from the electronic credit ledger was challenged before the Gujarat High Court and Karnataka High Court. Gujarat High Court, after examining the reply and material placed by revenue, held that there was material of fraudulent conduct by the taxpayer, and because the investigation was still on, the High Court did not interfere with the order, but left the question of challenge open, saying that Rule 86A, whether it is constitutional or not, has not been challenged. However, it gave directions to government to frame guidelines for passing of orders for attaching or blocking credit under Rule 86A. In the case of Aryan TradeLink, Karnataka High Court directed the authority, the assistant commissioner, to pass a reasoned order for blocking the credit, because the Rule 86A does not prescribe any framework as to in what form or shape the order should be passed, whether reasons should be given to the taxpayer or not. And therefore, because Aryan TradeLink did not have any reason or any, only a simple letter was there, so court directed for passing of reasoned order. However, the provision has come to challenge this 86A itself has been challenged before Punjab Haryana High Court in the case of Wiz Industry. Notices have been issued and the matter is pending.
Recently, the government introduced another provision of Rule 86B, which mandated 1% payment of tax liability in cash. There are certain conditions and applicability which are required to be noted under this provision. First of all, this provision is applicable where taxable supply is more than 50 lakh rupees per month. So only on those SSCs which have a taxable income of more than 50 lakh rupees, only on those SSCs, this provision of 1% will be applicable. This provision is not applicable where the taxpayer, which or even the managing director, full-time director, or the partner whose paid income tax does not exceed 1 lakh rupees for last 2 years, has received refund of unutilized ITC of more than 1 lakh rupees, has discharged output tax liability of cash of more than 1% of the total liability in the current financial year, and this provision is also not applicable on government departments, public sector units, local authority, and statutory bodies.
So again, this provision has also been challenged by Aap and Company before Gujarat High Court by saying that, if there is sufficient balance already lying in the electronic credit ledger, why should they be compelled to pay in cash, even by 1%? So this matter is still pending. Now with this, what we see is that there are numerous conditions under GST law for availing credit. There are numerous restrictions that are there. The authority for advanced ruling in particular has taken very narrow interpretation of the provisions of law. As Ayush rightly said, the taxpayer should consider all aspects before considering whether it is eligible for ITC, or it has to reverse any ITC, or any ITC is restricted or not. The jurisprudence in the previous regime very much holds good and should be taken support of for understanding the law. But the authorities have been amending law time and again ever since it's a 3.5-year-old law, and has undergone this very provisions have undergone several amendments, and therefore the taxpayer, because at the end of the day, the liability lies with the taxpayer. So taxpayer should be very cautious in these matters and should be on the right side of the law to avoid any consequences. Thank you everyone for your participation and in such large number. And we look forward to seeing you all in our third round, which will be sometime in March. We'll announce the date in advance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.